Hey, Baruch Halevi B here from Soul Centered. Thanks for tuning in. Soul Centered is a spiritual center for meaning, for purpose, and for healing in the afternoon of life. Afternoon of life, midlife onwards. And if you're in that time of your life, then this is for you. And we can transform the second half of life into the best, most meaningful, and inspirational time of our life if we get some new goals, new rules, and new tools. Teacher of mine, never met him, of course, but a great influence on me, Dr. Carl Jung, is the one who said that the morning of life and the afternoon of life have different rules. The problem is we try and live in the afternoon of life like we did in the morning of life. And when we do that, we're either lost at best or confused or destructive at worst. I see it over and over again. I counsel people. I'm a logotherapist, a meaning centered therapist and guide for people, particularly at this time of life, midlife and onwards, who are still operating off those old rules. And it's painful. And they wonder why. They're so successful in so many areas, but oftentimes not the areas that count most. In the afternoon of life, we start to see through the illusions and the delusions of the morning of life. One of those areas is that so many of us devote our resources in the morning of life to becoming successful out in the world, successful out in our businesses. I counsel so many people who are uber successful professionally, and then they go home and they're struggling in marriages or with kids and parents and relationships with themselves. Part of it comes down to they've inherited this old set of rules and they've taken it into the afternoon of life. And one of those says, power through challenging things or go around challenging things or retreat and go a different direction. Right? I'm an entrepreneur for many years, and one of the things you do is you pivot when you hit one of those roadblocks. I call them life's T's. Transitions, tests, trials, traumas, tragedies. Well, that might work when you're doing a startup to pivot in a different direction, but when you hit one of life's T's in your personal life and you pivot and you go a different direction, not all the time, but sometimes, even oftentimes, you're missing the opportunity. The opportunity is not to power through it and not to run from it, but to sit with it, to go into it, to understand it, to unpack it, and then to harness it and move forward. I've been dealing a lot with this around one of what I call the dark emotions of sadness. You know, one of the morning of life rules is that the dark emotions are to be avoided and you bypass them at any cost. Sadness, sorrow, anger, grief, despair, struggle, all kinds of struggles and doubts. And you come up to one of those and you don't want to deal with them. And you've inherited this belief that you're not supposed to deal with them. I've seen it over and over again lately where people are sad. There's so much sadness in the world in general, right? I'm here in Colorado, and I know if you're in California and other places, right, there's a steep sorrow around what's happening in the environment, the destruction that it's causing, but just also a sorrow to watch our beloved Earth on fire. There's sorrow around, of course, social unrest and political upheaval and COVID, of course, and I mean, the list goes on, and that's just out in the world. And then in our own lives, each of us has sorrow, sadness that's just built up layer after layer, becomes this sorrow, this impenetrable, immovable thing, and we hit it, and we don't know what to do with it. Especially so many of the people I guide who have mastery, and then they can't apply that mastery in this area, so they turn and they run. And what I do is I companion them, right? I walk with them into the darkness, whatever it might be, the sorrow, and we hold that space together. Instead of turning from it, we turn to it. One of my clients was talking about it feels like an onion, right? Layer after layer after layer, and I don't know if I can do it. And I thought that's exactly the analogy. Why? Onions make you cry, right? You cut into them, and the reaction is tears, and it's painful. It's actually painful. It hurts your eyes. I looked up, I know nothing about science, but I did look up a few different articles, and I learned, which is not shocking, onions do that as a defense mechanism. It's there to push away the predators, to push away the animal that's about to eat the onion, and so it causes this resistance. And I thought that's exactly it. But instead, in the afternoon of life, in the morning of life, we would turn and run from it. In the afternoon of life, we turn towards it because those dark emotions, those strong feelings are actually telling us that there is gold underneath this, right? Robert Johnson, great psychotherapist, talks about gold in the shadows. That's exactly where you're going to find your gold, your meaning, your truth, your purpose, your healing, your inspiration is not the other direction at the T in life, but the direction that is of heart, is of emotion, is yes, dark and difficult emotions, but that's why we need to go into those emotions and push through it. And if we can do that, right, and we can start conditioning ourselves that in the afternoon of life, those more difficult emotions, darker emotions, are not something to be run from, but something to be turned towards, something to cultivate new tools to face, to embrace, and to move through on our path to growth, we can transform the second half of life into the most amazing, inspirational time of our life. And it begins with looking out in the world and asking ourselves, where are the onions? And then saying, bring them on, because obviously they're pointing the way to our tears and to our heart and to our soul. I would love to hear from you. I would love to work with you. I offer complimentary discovery sessions where we can talk about finding meaning and purpose and healing in the afternoon of your life, no matter what T you are facing. Listen for the emotion, turn to that emotion. It is a signpost on the way to meaning, purpose, and healing. Take care. Shalom, salam, namaste. Peace.